Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ryamizard and February Ramadan Fajri. Today I'm going to talk about community participation in innovation in education. But first, we have to know what is innovation in education first. Stephen Sutardo, teacher in West Jakarta, Indonesia, once said that innovation in education is about more than just technology. It's about how you can use technology to empower students to become lifelong learners who are agents of change. Many mistakenly believe in innovation has to do with the use of technology or new inventions. Isdall explains that outdated thinking of how to design a school leads to subpar performance in public education. Learning experiences could be redesigned to be far more relevant to students' interests and career path, personalized to their aptitudes and abilities, and responsive to their culture and identities. Innovation in education encourages teachers and students to explore, research, and use all the tools to uncover something new. It involves a different way of looking at problems and solving them. The thinking process that goes into it will help students develop their creativity and their problem-solving skill. Innovation does not mean creating something from nothing. Just like with any good science project, it relies on researching existing solutions to come out with new hypotheses. Then we're going to discuss communicative participation. But first, let's discuss about community participation in worldwide. Community participation can be loosely defined as the involvement of people in a community in projects to solve their own problems. People cannot be forced to participate in projects which affect their lives but should be given the opportunity where possible. This is held to be basic human right and a fundamental principle of democracy. Community participation is especially important in emergency sanitation programs where people may be unaccustomed to their surroundings and new sanitation facilities. Communicative participation can take place during any of the following activities. First, needs of assessment, expressing opinions about desirable improvements, prioritizing goals, and negotiating with agencies. The second is planning, formulating objectives, setting goals, and criticizing plans. Next, mobilizing, raising awareness in a community about needs, establishing or supporting organizational structures within the community, and training, participation in formal or informal training activities to enhance communication, construction, maintenance, and financial management skills. And the last is implementing, engaging in management activities, contributing directly to construction, operation and maintenance with labor and materials, contributing cash towards costs, paying of services or membership fees or community organization. And of course, there are reasons that follows when there is community participation. The following are some of the main reasons why people are usually willing to participate in humanitarian programs. First is community participation motivates people to work together. People feel a sense of community and recognize the benefits of their involvements. And the second, social, religious, or traditional obligation for mutual help. The third is genuine community participation, where people see a genuine opportunity to better their own lives and for the community as a whole. And then lastly is remuneration in cash or can. Indonesia's child. Before we Let's talk about the community participation in Indonesia. But before we talk about the main participation, let's discuss the problem that happening our education. Indonesia's children and young people are not being delivered quality education because of the prevailing dominance of political, corporate, or bureaucratic elites in post-Suharto Indonesia, a new study has argued. A report entitled Beyond Access, Making Indonesian Education System Work from the Sydney-based Lowy Institute analyzes the shortcomings of the education system of Southeast Asia's largest nation and economy, tracing its failure to politics and power rather than a lack of educational funding. In 2002, newly democratic Indonesia inserted into its constitution a requirement that governments at all levels to dedicate at least 20% of their budgets to education. This was a major improvement from the authoritarian era when by 1995, education spending counted for less than 1% of GDP. The Program for International Student Assessment or PSA test last conducted by the OECD in 2015. It showed that Indonesian students were performing at lower levels in all areas, science, mathematics, and reading than the OECD average. A shocking of 42% Indonesian students were failing to meet minimum standards in all three areas covered by by the test being outperformed by students in neighboring Malaysia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Then, what kind of community participation that can be done to fill this gap? Young teacher can help the country by volunteering in education. Government has started sending their undergraduate university students to rural area of the country to educate the students there. When we're talking about innovation in education, of course, there are learning sources that uh, follow the education innovation. And in learning sources, there are many different kind of learning sources. But in this video, we'll talk about two. The first is the traditional learning resources and the innovation learning resource. But first, let's talk about what is learning resources first. So, learning resources are instructional materials. Every teacher needs supplies and resources in order to have successful classroom. Writing utensils, paper, and inspirational wall signs are all useful objects in a classroom, but they are not instructional materials. Instructional materials are the tools used in educational lessons, which includes activities, learning, and assessment. Basically, any resource a teacher used to help him teach his students in an instructional material. There are many types of instructional materials, but let's look at some of the most common ones. The first is traditional resources. It includes in any textbooks and workbooks used in the classroom. For example, language arts classroom almost always have literature textbooks, writing textbooks, and even vocabulary and spelling workbooks. In addition to this, traditional resources also include any supplemental reading material like novels or poems outside of textbooks. This material can really help to introduce new concepts to your students. For example, when learning the concept of theme, and literary textbooks can provide numerous reading materials, all displaying the theme in different types of literature. In the same way, workbooks can give some useful basic literature practice activities for a new vocabulary words or even writing activities that might be difficult for students. Then, when the mastery is shown on a basic level, a teacher can introduce more challenging material related to that concept. Next is innovative resources. Innovative resources can be handouts, worksheets, tests, quizzes, projects, or anything that is fit for the learning condition. Many of these are used for assessment in the classroom, which is determining for the level of learning on any given topic. For instance, different handouts or worksheets can be used throughout a unit to see which students are getting it and which students are struggling. Evaluating these materials is very important. Everything a teacher creates must be a true assessment of the learning objectives. Take example of graphic type learning resource. It's a visual representation of information. Diagram, charts, tables, flow charts, and graphs are all examples of graphic organizer. For instance, in a math classroom, it is essential to use graphs on a coordinate plane when learning about the equation of lines so that students can actually see how a line is graphed. In the language arts, Venn diagram and plot diagrams are clear instructional tools to use when comparing or analyzing two events in a piece of literature. To evaluate your graphic organizer, the most important aspect is to make sure they support learning and are not merely creative distractions. Some material can be very fun and interesting, but if they do not support learning, they should not be included in your lesson. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.